It was Friday afternoon, 2 hours after their departure from New York. They still had one more hour of driving before reaching their home. They accompanied their only child, Lisa, to her campus, where she had commenced her studies at the college level. Nancy turned and looked at her husband, Bill, who was sitting behind the wheel of his Ford Transit. They had been unable to take her BMW 230i convertible because they had to move Lisa's belongings. She reflected on how quickly time passes, noting that it was on the day she after graduating from high school, GRA took a pregnancy test, which returned a positive result. Bill was still at university, studying to become an engineer. Their parents were supportive because they knew each other and were aware that their children were in love. GRA stayed with her parents after the baby was born, and they married after Bill graduated. She became a homemaker and observed her husband's career trajectory. He began as a junior engineer at a local factory and, 10 years later, had become the owner of his own air conditioning business. Subsequently, the business flourished. Bill entered into contracts with major construction companies. He was a dedicated individual who prioritized his work and family. "The house will be empty without her," Bill stated with sadness. "She was closer to you than to me, she was always Daddy's little girl. She is our princess and should be treated as such. However, have you observed her behavior in recent months? She treated me like Nancy, she treated you with disrespect whenever you were at home. She was always by your side, but sometimes she laughed at me when you weren't there. She locked herself in her room and avoided me. It is important to remember that she is still a child. She was under a lot of pressure during her senior year of high school. She wanted to get the highest grades to fulfill her dream of attending Columbia University. At the very least, try to understand. I know Bill, but did you see her reaction every time we were in the same room? Do you remember? 2 months ago, I was sitting on the couch when she approached me with a knife. I believed she was going to harm me. On that day, I observed hatred in her eyes. It is your imagination, Nancy." Bill was annoyed. Nancy remained silent and did not want to continue the conversation. She did not want Bill to become angry. At least, not at that moment. She took out her mobile phone and sent a text message. The message read, "We will be there in 30 minutes. 1 minute later, her phone beeped. Bill asked, "Is this from Lisa?" The response was, "No, this is Betty." Furthermore, it is unclear how she and Paul interact. At the barbecue party, she expressed frustration with his work schedule and asserted that she cares for him more than he cares for her. However, she should be aware that the sheriff's role is not without its challenges. She should have considered these factors before marrying him. Nancy remained silent, hoping to maintain Bill's composure until they reached their destination. She simply leaned against the window and hoped for a quick arrival, as Bill pulled into the driveway. Upon arriving at his residence, Bill observed the sheriff's vehicle stationed in front of his garage. He then parked his van behind the sheriff's car. Paul and his assistant emerged from the vehicle and greeted Bill. "What is the current status of the situation?" Bill inquired, his tone reflecting confusion. Meanwhile, Nancy hastened back and positioned herself behind Paul's assistant. Bill's expression darkened, and he uttered, "This is the most challenging aspect of my job." The sheriff then produced a thick paper envelope and presented it to Bill. "William Thompson, you have been served," Paul stated, his tone suggesting a degree of levity. Bill, however, did not respond with humor. Instead, he opened the envelope with a trembling hand and turned to Nancy. She lowered her eyes because she could not look her husband in the face. "Why, Nancy? You expressed your best wishes for Lisa's success in her academic pursuits and her future endeavors. You both departed with expressions of contentment. This is what I refer to as hypocrisy. Bill, I urge you to comprehend Paul's statements. Why do you persist in your erroneous actions?" Bill became enraged and accused Nancy of betrayal. He demanded that she either cease her affection for him or initiate a divorce. "Bill, the restraining order has already taken effect. I advise you to depart this place." Paul attempted to maintain composure. Bill proceeded to his vehicle and discarded the envelope onto the passenger seat, then abruptly departed, slamming the door behind him. He approached Paul and demanded the return of his personal belongings, stating, "I hope you are not so inconsiderate that you will refuse me access to my house and take some of my personal belongings." He then proceeded to the front door, producing the key to do so. Paul, in turn, produced a set of keys from his pocket and handed them to his assistant, indicating that he had already taken care of the situation. Is everything in order? Or is it Betty? She was scheduled to arrive today with the mechanic while we were away. Am I correct in my assumption? Paul did not respond, he merely nodded to his assistant, who then escorted Bill into the house and remained at his side while he filled 2 suitcases. Do not be concerned, Paul informed Nancy. My personnel will be conducting regular patrols in this area. If I were in your position, I would refrain from leaving the house for several days. He then added, he is extremely angry and capable of doing anything in that state of mind. I will remain at home. I will call. Nancy replied in the affirmative when asked if she would be willing to spend the weekend at the house. Paul, her friend, responded in a mutter. Bill, the assistant, retrieved a set of keys from the premises and placed them in the back of the van. Nancy was handed a set of keys by the assistant. Bill then proceeded to read the divorce document, which he had retrieved from an envelope. Paul then ordered Bill to pack his belongings and leave the premises. Bill then inquired about the financial terms of the divorce. Paul clarified that he was not willing to accept a 50% share of his business or 50% of his savings. He also stated that his former wife was seeking a house, a vehicle, and monthly child support. You are leaving me with nothing. If you do not leave, I will have no choice but to arrest you. Nancy was fortunate to achieve her objectives and to become emancipated from her husband and daughter. Paul appended his signature as a witness and provided Bill with a copy of the document. Bill proceeded to his vehicle, and Nancy, enraged, confronted him. She demanded to know his identity and the duration of his infidelity. Bill attacked Nancy, instructing her to enter the residence and secure it behind her. Paul informed Nancy of his presence and proceeded towards Bill's vehicle. The assistant accompanied Nancy inside, urging her to avoid any rash actions. Nancy acknowledged that her decision to marry Bill was a misguided one, given his propensity for infidelity. She began to shout and started the engine. She had chosen to divorce me because she was aware that I would never agree to an open marriage. How are you? He inquired, bewildered. What is an open marriage? He asked, perplexed. Don't try to hide it, she replied. Everyone knows this. What are you talking about? He demanded, exasperated. Look, Paul, she began, we all know that when you work at night, your brother Tom warms your bed, which, of course, completely by chance is your wife. Oh, your wife is cheating, she concluded, her tone betraying her disbelief. In light of the fact that you have betrayed me, I have no intention of apologizing for sharing this information with you. It is evident that you are already accustomed to dealing with individuals who are economical with the truth. Despite your role as the sheriff, you are unable to discern when someone is being untruthful. Perhaps it would be more beneficial for you to speak with Betty. Once alone, Nancy poured herself a glass of wine and stood in front of Pagnol's masterpiece, the railway station. The painting was worth a considerable sum. She reflected on the considerable sum he had left behind, a loss to him, while she remained in possession of it. She then proceeded to call Jason, but the call failed to connect. She then terminated the call, and, in a contemplative moment, considered that he should have come to collect it in person after work. She took a sip of wine and reflected on how they initially encountered each other. It was a year ago when she was in a department store and encountered him. He was in charge of the shoe section and was in his early 20s with an ideal physique. She was immediately captivated and exchanged phone numbers with him the following day. She invited him to her home, and he arrived during her lunch break. He exuded a vitality that left her feeling as though she had been violated. That evening, she was so affected by the encounter that she could barely walk. She informed Bill that she was unwell and retired to bed early. From that point onward, she came to recognize that Bill could never rival her lover, who was younger and possessed. Bill was always occupied with his own pursuits in the evening, and he often felt fatigued. He consistently assisted Lisa with her academic assignments and then remained awake late into the night, perusing his professional documentation. As soon as he retired to bed, he would swiftly fall asleep. Nancy finished her wine and poured herself another glass. She pressed the speed dial button once more. She then received an automated voice message stating that the number she was calling was temporarily unavailable and to try again later. She was visibly upset and threw the phone onto the sofa, grabbed the remote control, and turned on the TV. However, she was unable to concentrate on the screen and decided to take a shower. This incident occurred a week ago when she was taking a shower with Jason. She took a shower with Jason, who then led her to the location where she was sitting. This was a fact she had consistently denied to her husband. Jason made it clear that her body belonged to him and him alone. On the final day, when she was at his house and he was at hers, she had a spare key and could visit her lover at any time. On occasion, she would visit him at his place of work and clean the entire apartment. She purchased him clothing, footwear, cologne, and an expensive watch for his birthday. She also provided him with a reasonable amount of pocket money from time to time. On occasion, she allowed him to drive her BMW. Nancy was aware of her own sexual desire and sought to satisfy it. She recalled the last time she had sexual intercourse with Bill. She was unsure of the duration of the interval between that event and the present moment. It might have been 3 months, or perhaps 6, or even longer. She was indifferent to the passage of time. She had a younger lover, a man who could satisfy her in a way that Bill could not. They would be together, and they would not be afraid of anyone. She was free, and he would move in with her that evening. After showering, she proceeded to the living room, retrieved her cellular telephone, and loudly inquired, "Where are you, Jason? Why don't you respond to my calls?" She then proceeded to the kitchen to prepare a light meal. As she was about to leave the house, she noticed something on the television screen that caught her attention. She hastened into the living room and increased the volume. She observed with dismay as Paul, handcuffed, was transported to a police vehicle. Sheriff Paul Anderson initially shot his wife in the head, then proceeded to his brother's place of employment and shot him 5 times. Both his wife and brother have perished, the presenter Nancy stated. She then terminated the transmission. She turned off the television and sat down, overcome with shock. "Betty, I cautioned you to be extremely careful." She recalled that it was Bill who informed Paul about his wife's infidelity. This realization prompted her to shed tears, acknowledging that her actions had ultimately resulted in the demise of her closest friend and romantic partner. Despite Paul's assistance in the dissolution of her marriage, she was unable to fully detach from the tragedy. She was indifferent to her husband's fate. That night, she experienced insomnia for the first time. She felt completely isolated. She had kicked her husband out, her lover was unreachable, her best friend was killed, her daughter avoided her, and her parents had already passed away. Her sister remained, but she lived with her husband, Tom, in another city, 300 miles away. On Saturday, she still couldn't reach Jason. She was simultaneously alarmed and annoyed. He could have left a message to let her know what was going on. On Sunday morning, Nancy thought over and over again. She decided to go to Jason's apartment. Upon entering the apartment, she immediately sensed that something was amiss. The photographs on the wall and all electronic items were conspicuous by their absence. His closet was empty, and there was no indication of any of his personal belongings in the bathroom. She collapsed onto the bed, overcome with emotion. He had left, leaving her without a word. Nancy's anguished cry echoed through the room, "How could he?" Nancy was devastated. She had been left by her husband, who had initiated the divorce in order to move in with her and subsequently marry her after the divorce was finalized. She left the apartment and went to a department store that was open on Sundays, hoping to find Jason at work. She knew one of his colleagues. She was informed that Jason would be working for approximately half an hour. Upon arriving at work on Friday morning, she was requested to return to his room because he had forgotten his wallet. He did not return, and later that day, he emailed his boss a letter of resignation. Nancy proceeded to walk to her car, her thoughts a jumble of confusion and disbelief. She began to cry on her way home and stopped. At a gas station, she was disconcerted to find that her credit and debit cards were not operational. She expressed her displeasure when she was compelled to pay with the limited cash she had in her purse. On Monday morning, she imbibed alcohol to assuage her distress. She proceeded to the bank and met with the manager. She was taken aback when she was informed that the joint account held by Mrs. Thompson and her husband had a balance of less than $5. At the meeting on Friday, Mrs. Thompson was informed that her husband had closed their joint credit card account. He also reminded the bank of his intention to divorce her and to no longer be responsible for the mortgage on their house or for the payments on her car. This information was incorrect. "The mortgage on my house should have been paid off by now," said an astonished Nancy. "Furthermore, the bank issued a loan for your car. We have all the supporting papers." Mrs. Thompson, your husband also took out a second mortgage on the house to pay for your daughter's schooling and expenses. However, there is no evidence of this in the account. There is no money in my account, Nancy inquired last week. The monthly mortgage payment was debited from your account. There have been no deposits in the last 3 months. Whatever money there was has been exhausted. What about my husband's business? A monthly transfer from the company account is expected. Unfortunately, Mrs. Thompson, I am unable to provide the specifics of Mr. Thompson's account. However, I can inform you that if the forthcoming mortgage repayments are not made, both your house and your car will be repossessed. I have not worked throughout my entire life, I have solely been a housewife. I believe it would be most beneficial for you to discuss these matters with your legal counsel. The safe that she shared with her husband contained only her jewelry. She removed all of the items and placed them in her purse as soon as she left the bank. She then contacted Bill via his cell phone and received an email and voicemail indicating that the number was no longer in service. She was perplexed and proceeded to call Bill at his place of employment. The phone on the other end continued to ring without an answer. After several rings, the phone remained unanswered. She then promptly called Lisa's number. "What do you want?" Lisa demanded angrily. "Is this how you talk to your mother?" Nancy inquired. "This is how I talk to you," Lisa replied. "I just want to talk to your father." "I can't reach him by phone," Nancy stated. "Do you know where he is?" "I am aware of his whereabouts and how to contact him, but I am not disclosing that information. Your callous abandonment of him makes you the most unscrupulous person on earth. I have no desire to have any further contact with you. I no longer consider myself your daughter. I will not be contacting you again. I will be changing my number." The phone rang, startling Nancy. She entered her vehicle and, gripping the steering wheel, gazed into the distance, her thoughts elsewhere. She sought to discern where she had erred in her plan and why Jason had departed without a word. She contacted her lawyer and secured an appointment later that afternoon. Her lawyer informed her, "Mrs. Thompson, following your telephone conversation earlier this morning, we conducted research into your husband's company. Our findings indicate that he filed for bankruptcy protection prior to your serving him with legal documents. It is probable that the company will be liquidated, although you previously asserted that you could receive millions in compensation." "Nancy, please calm down. 2 weeks ago, there were no indications of financial distress, the situation appeared advantageous. The company's bank account has been frozen. What about a car and a mortgage on a house? Last week, he used your house as collateral for a loan, again before filing for divorce papers for a car. When you sign the title, you also sign the loan in your name. Name all this. It cannot be true." Nancy began to cry. "The company has no funds available, and my vehicle and residence will be seized. I am concerned that this will occur. Is there a way to persuade him to at least pay the mortgage? The company was his sole source of income. Without this, he will be financially devastated. Once he begins working, we can require him to pay child support. We had several investment certificates that I was unable to locate the certificates in our safe deposit box. We can ascertain the date on which they were cashed and conduct a comprehensive investigation into the company in question. We will have to locate your husband. We are unaware of his whereabouts. His legal counsel handles all matters pertaining to this case. Please assist us in locating him. The additional expenses have yet to be determined. How will the bill be paid?" Nancy had not previously considered these expenses, but she smiled. "I have a painting that costs a great deal of money. If you would like, I can provide the funds via check so that we can proceed with the work. I will contact you shortly. One final matter, Mrs. Thompson. I believe it would be advisable to prepare to vacate your home. It would be prudent to begin searching for a place to stay for the night." She sat in front of a painting by Pagnol, sincerely desirous of leaving, but constrained by circumstances to remain. She then turned to the painting and, taking out her cell phone, called her sister. "Sister, I would like to request your assistance. Nancy and I are divorcing. I am seeking temporary accommodation. Would you be so kind as to allow me to stay in your guest room? I will explain everything in detail. When we meet, I would like to discuss Lisa. Given her background, I anticipate that she will have a negative reaction to the situation. I am aware that I am the bad guy in this scenario. I am unsure if there is a way for you both to work this out. One option could be to seek the advice of a consultant. However, I doubt that this will be effective. I am sorry for the situation, but I do not believe that I am the problem. I do not think that Tom will refuse to cooperate, and our daughter will be happy. Thank you, sister. I will inform you of my arrival. On Tuesday, Nancy terminated the call. Nancy proceeded to a fine art gallery, where she encountered an appraiser. She inquired about the value of her Peñol train station painting. The appraiser took the painting and meticulously examined every detail. He noted that the railway station, Peñol's most celebrated work, encapsulates the full spectrum of human emotion. It evokes both the joy of arrival and the poignancy of departure. The painting was a composite of happiness and sadness. The man placed it on an easel and directed a lamp light onto it. He then used a magnifying glass to examine it more closely. After a couple of minutes, he began to laugh. Is there something wrong? He asked Nancy. The man then produced something which he proceeded to show her. He then proceeded to place his laptop on the table adjacent to his easel and opened a website. He then proceeded to input a few keys, which resulted in an image of the painting in question appearing on the screen. He then proceeded to zoom in on the bottom left corner, where he indicated that there was a man and a young girl observing a woman walking in the direction of the train, with her back towards them. The man appears to be in a state of profound sadness, while the girl is visibly distraught. It is evident that the scene is one of emotional distress. Now, direct your attention to the same scene depicted in your painting. Here, the man is seen handing Nancy a magnifying glass. She takes a brief look at the lower left corner and appears to be overcome with emotion. Both the man and the little girl are depicted in a state of distress. Nancy observed that the subjects were laughing and showing the middle finger to the woman, as if they were mocking her. This led her to conclude that the painting was a forgery. She expressed her dismay and regret, and the man offered her $200. Nancy's intention was to hang the painting so that her friends and clients could enjoy it. Nancy was overcome with mirth and proceeded to finalize the transaction, subsequently departing the premises in a state of emotional distress. Her mobile device rang, and she learned that the caller was her sister. "Don't call me sister," Nancy interjected, attempting to disguise her anguish. "What? Why?" her sister's irate voice demanded. Tom also received an email from an unidentified sender. A link to an adult website was sent to all of our relatives and mutual friends. The link led to a plethora of videos of the subject engaging in sexual activity with her boyfriend. The videos dated from last year to last week. How could you, Nancy? Some of the videos were filmed in the marital bed, while others were filmed in a hotel room. Nancy's sister demanded, "I need to explain." "You don't need to explain anything to me. You're disgusting. Tom doesn't want you around his family. He said that you will defile me and my daughter. Our doors are closed to you. Go to your lover." The phone rang. Nancy realized that her sister had known the entire time. Nancy's countenance was a picture of distress. What was she to do? She felt lightheaded. It was apparent to her that the entire city was aware of her situation. She was compelled to flee. 5 years later, Bill was seated in the front row of the church. He reflected on the telephone call he had received earlier that morning. He had not informed anyone about this. How could he have done so? On this momentous occasion, he had just escorted Lisa down the aisle. As the couple stood at the altar, Lisa uttered her consent to her betrothed, the gentleman she had been courting since her freshman year of college. His thoughts reverted to the day when a distraught Lisa had sought his counsel. He recalled that he was in his office when his beloved "Please come home, Daddy. Please, please come home," Lisa cried. "What is going on, honey? Why are you crying? Please, Dad, go now. I'm waiting on the street in front of our house. What is wrong? I'll call your mom." "No, don't call her. Just come, please, Dad. I'm on my way, honey. I'm on the way to your house." Bill began to experience a range of concerns. He wondered why his daughter was not at school, why she was outside the house instead of inside, and why she did not want him to warn Nancy. Was she injured? He suddenly braked with a loud screeching of tires, realizing he was about to run a red light. He told himself to remain calm, knowing that he was in control of the situation. Lisa had been working on the project until late the evening before. He had even assisted her and provided her with additional suggestions. They collectively compiled the material into a PowerPoint presentation and saved it to a USB drive. Lisa was waiting 1 block down the street. Bill ceased driving and she promptly entered the vehicle. She implored him not to enter the house. "Please, Lisa, elucidate the situation." "I am sorry, Bill, but I must ask you to turn off the engine. I forgot my USB drive this morning when I was rushing to school. I received special permission to come home during lunch to pick it up. I saw an old Honda in our driveway. I entered the house and heard strange sounds coming from your and your mother's bedroom." He proceeded to ascend the stairs in a subdued manner and surveyed the bedroom. The door was not entirely closed. Lisa began to weep. "Okay, honey, breathe," Bill said in a soothing voice as he stroked her back. "There's no need to rush. I saw a man. They were both naked. They had sex." "Dad, she's cheating on you and us," Lisa sobbed again. Bill sat in a state of shock, coming to the realization that his 17-year-old daughter was engaging in sexual intercourse with another individual. The subject was a 35-year-old male. The daughter was aware of the concepts of infidelity and sexual intercourse. "Is there any doubt about the veracity of your account?" He turned to face her. She retrieved her cellular device and activated it for her father. Bill's world abruptly ceased functioning when he heard Nancy vocalizing. "Get her out of the house," he instructed. "I do not wish to see her anymore. She is not my mother. My mother would. I must consider the implications of your actions. I am not inclined to accept them. I believe the most appropriate course of action would be to remove her from the situation entirely. However, I am aware that there are legal procedures to follow. I would like you to explain your reasoning, as I am unsure whether I should continue to stay with her or not. I do not condone infidelity, but I would like to understand why she did it. Was it a one-time occurrence, or did she intend to continue it? The nature of the relationship is unclear. It is possible that the affair began recently, or that it has been ongoing for some time. It is also possible that the individual in question will continue the relationship in this location." Lisa indicated the Honda, which was pulling out of the driveway, and turned away from them. Bill started the engine, and they followed the Honda into the store. They observed a man putting on a uniform jacket as he left his car in the parking lot and headed towards the employee entrance. He proceeded towards the employee entrance, stating that he worked there. Bill inquired as to whether the man was young, regardless of his age. Lisa responded by taking several pictures of the man and his vehicle. She then informed him that she would provide a ride to school. She would go home to retrieve the flash drive and bring it to him. She would also inform his mother that she was not his biological mother. To her father, "I will inform Nancy that you requested my presence and that I am to bring the item to you. I do not wish for you to meet her alone, not now, not at any other time. I understand your reasoning, but I am uncertain as to why. The reason is simple: I do not want her to know that we know. I do not want you to divulge this information out of anger. What are you going to do? I want to know. I would like you to keep me apprised of all developments. Do you solemnly swear to do so?" "I do, my prince. I pledge to keep you informed. I love you, Dad." Lisa embraced Bill. "I love you too. Now, take me to school and retrieve the USB, as my lesson will commence shortly." Bill parked in the driveway and entered the house. "Darling, I'm home." Nancy rushed out of the bedroom in disbelief. Nancy regarded Bill with a sense of relief, as though she had just narrowly avoided a potentially disastrous situation. "Oh, Bill," she said, her voice betraying her surprise. "Is that what you wanted?" He met her gaze directly, his eyes conveying a sense of urgency. "I received a call from Lisa. She forgot her flash drive, and I need to bring it to her." He approached Nancy and detected a hint of sexual desire emanating from her. "Do we have time for a quick encounter?" he asked, his tone suggestive. "No," she replied, her voice firm. "There's something else I need to discuss with you. I was somewhat fatigued from cleaning the house and was perspiring heavily. You will not be pleased, and you are obliged to bring Lisa her USB drive." "You are correct in your assumption." Bill conducted an exhaustive online search for the most advanced video and audio surveillance device, as well as cell phone spy software. He subsequently proceeded to an electronics store and procured the requisite items. He constructed one. The primary decision that he made from this day forward was that he would refrain from any further sexual contact with his wife. He would instead share everything with Lisa over the next 3 months. He had learned a great deal and was now aware of all the details of Nancy's relationship with Jason White. Jason came to their house almost every day, either in the morning when he worked the second shift or during lunch on weekends when she had to go shopping. She would stop by his house if he was not working. She also had a spare key. Bill discovered that she purchased numerous items for Jason. He also listened to a conversation between Nancy and her close friend, Betty, in which they divulged their deepest secrets. This is how he learned that Betty engaged in sexual intercourse with his brother. On a Saturday, Bill searched through Nancy's belongings and discovered a key hidden at the bottom of her purse. He promptly drove to the mall and removed the duplicate key. The following week, he visited Jason's apartment, which was located in an old building in a high-crime area. The building lacked security cameras and had an unsecured main entrance. He then proceeded to lock the apartment. He placed several tiny, hidden spy cameras in the apartment, which were controlled by small, long-life lithium button cells. He also searched everywhere and found all of the expensive items that Nancy had purchased. Bill began to develop a plan to extricate himself from this relationship, with the intention of causing significant harm to both Nancy and her lover. He requested that a jeweler create copies of all of Nancy's jewelry. He then ordered a reproduction of Pagnol's railway station painting, created by a professional artist with specific instructions. He met with Steve, a childhood friend who was a corporate lawyer. Steve scheduled a meeting for a couple of days later. Steve also introduced him to his cousin Linda, who was an auditor and expert in her field. Bill was candid and direct with them. He sought to legally sell his company and then exert control from a distance. In a couple of years, he planned to ask his daughter, Lisa, to purchase the company. He often met with Linda, either in her office or over lunch. She was a widow. Her husband had died in a car accident. She had a 10-year-old daughter. 1 year Bill's daughter, Lisa, had recently begun dating a man named Steve. Despite her initial reluctance, she gradually became more open to the idea of a relationship. One evening, Steve invited Lisa to dinner and a movie. She accepted, and that same evening, she went to spend the night at her friend Linda's house. Bill, Steve's father, had work to do late that night, so he told Lisa he would pick her up at her friend's house the next morning. "This is my inaugural social engagement since the demise of my spouse. I comprehend your sentiments and hope you found it agreeable. Might I inquire as to the possibility of a future encounter when circumstances permit? We are obliged to collaborate professionally, yet you remain wed." She leaned over and kissed Bill on the cheek. She advised him to prioritize one task at a time. She opened the car door and proceeded towards her residence. Bill suggested that Nancy modify her vehicle. Nancy was initially hesitant, preferring her Lexus. However, when Bill suggested that driving a BMW convertible would make her look younger, she readily agreed. The Lexus was fully paid for, so Bill sold it and cashed out. He then took out a car loan for a BMW and put it in Nancy's name. When she signed the document, she believed it was for a certificate of ownership. The documents she signed, along with other papers, would ultimately prove problematic. A couple of weeks later, Bill observed that when Nancy went to the bathroom after sex, Jason left the bedroom naked and proceeded to Lisa's room. He drew Lisa's attention to this, and she became visibly enraged. They decided to install a camera in her room, which revealed some alarming behavior. Jason opened the drawer, took Lisa's underwear, and masturbated with it that afternoon while Nancy was sitting on the couch. Lisa approached her from behind. If Bill had not intervened at this juncture, Lisa would have been subjected to further abuse, potentially resulting in her injury or even death. That evening, Lisa informed her father that she would not have faced incarceration had she killed Nancy, given that she was still a minor. Bill was unsurprised when he learned that Jason was urging Nancy to divorce him and cut him financially off. However, the lovers were unaware that Bill was already one step ahead. He was cognizant of the fact that Nancy frequently permitted Jason to operate the BMW and even engage in sexual intercourse with her in the vehicle's rear seating area. Upon Nancy's visit to the divorce lawyer, Paul proposed a course of action and was aware that the lawyer had conducted research into his company and assets. He then took out a second mortgage on his house to pay for Lisa's full tuition. The following day, he filed for bankruptcy. He was aware that, upon being served, Betty would change the locks on his house. During a barbecue party in New York the previous weekend, both father and daughter played their part. Paul and Betty were as despite his previous actions, Paul was cordial and even assisted with preparing meat on the grill. It would not have been apparent to onlookers that he was a traitor that Friday morning while Nancy was in the bathroom. Bill took her cell phone and sent Jason a text message, stating, "I will be at your house at 8. I expect you to engage in sexual intercourse with me before I depart with them for the last time. Obtain permission from your employer and return home to what will always be yours. I will inform them that I require purchasing a few items. Do not contact or text me. I will leave my cell phone at home in case they contact me." He inquired as to her whereabouts and stated that he would see her soon, indicating that they would resume their relationship. After sending the message, Bill deleted it and returned the phone to Nancy's purse. Jason was unaware that, as soon as he entered his apartment, 3 men would attack him with a knife to his throat. They forced him to send a resignation email to his manager and another to the building owner, stating that he would be leaving at the end of the month. They then administered tranquilizers, cleaned out his apartment, and removed the spy device. The perpetrators will then proceed to place cameras and take whatever they can carry, effectively making it appear as though he has vanished entirely. They will then wrap his body in a carpet, place him in a van, and drive away. One of the individuals will drive his car. Jason will never be seen again. Neither Lisa nor Linda would have any knowledge of Bill's actions towards Jason. This will remain a closely guarded secret, which he will take with him to the grave on Friday afternoon, following the service. Bill checked into a motel room on Friday afternoon. He watched the evening news about Paul and his adulterous wife before dinner. One of the men who was in Jason's apartment, he visited Bill and provided him with all the cameras, receiving the final payment in return. No words were exchanged. Bill was not even informed of the location of Jason's burial. On Saturday morning, Bill departed from the motel, purchased a new cell phone, and discarded his old one. He contacted Lisa and provided her with his new contact information. He proceeded to drive to Linda's residence, where he spent the majority of his time editing videos. He deliberately obscured Jason's face to prevent any potential link between the two individuals being established by the authorities. After he was reported missing, he remained in the guest room while simultaneously establishing a friendship with Linda's son, Bill. Linda initiated the final phase of their plan when an elderly couple from Seattle purchased his company. The couple was actually Linda's aunt and uncle. No employees were terminated on Monday. Lisa contacted him and informed him that Nancy was seeking his assistance. They both expressed amusement. He subsequently uploaded all the videos to an adult website using a fictitious email address. He sent a link to all the individuals they had known, including Nancy's brother. He continued to reside with Linda for the subsequent 3 months until the proceedings of his divorce case were heard. They continued to date, but without any sexual contact. Linda made it clear that Bill would only touch her when he was single and not before. Bill agreed because he wanted to keep his vows for the remainder of the mark. One of the advantages of staying with Linda was that if there was any investigation, Bill would say that he was penniless and could not afford to pay rent, and that his friend Linda was kind enough to let him take over her guest room until on the day of the hearing, Bill was in a position to resume his legal proceedings. However, Nancy was absent from the proceedings, having already lost her house and car to repossession. Bill was financially unstable and unemployed. The judge granted the divorce without alimony or division of property. Bill's lawyer did not object. Later, they encountered each other in the corridor. "You are a very smart man, Mr. Thompson," said the lawyer. Bill frowned and walked away. His daughter's voice brought him back to the present. "Dad, what were you talking about?" she asked. "This is the dance of the father of the bride. Everyone is looking at us, but you don't move at all." "I apologize, Princess. I was thinking about something else." Bill took his daughter's hand, turned her around, and they both began to move to the beat of the music. "Now I need to dance with your mother," Bill said to Lisa. When the song ended, he promised his younger brother that he would be third on the list. Lisa smiled. Bill approached Linda and invited her to the dance floor. Later, Bill walked up to the bar and ordered whiskey. He sat down, and his thoughts went back to the phone call he had received. On that morning at home in his bedroom, Bill received a telephone call from a man named Dr. Henry Duzza, who identified himself as being from Dallas, Texas. The caller's purpose was to inquire about Bill's wife. Bill was confused and unaware of any issues with his wife. He then heard a woman's voice in the next room. The caller identified himself as Bill's former wife, Nancy Thompson. Bill was taken aback by this revelation, as he had not heard that name in 5 years. On the bed, I informed the doctor that I am a psychologist and that I am treating my patient, Nancy Thompson, in her final days. Do you have a few minutes to let me briefly explain the situation? Yes, go ahead, said a confused Bill. The patient revealed that she had informed her husband about her life from the time she was a young girl until they met. She stated that he was the only man she had ever known until she met a certain Jason. She then proceeded to describe the circumstances surrounding her decision to divorce her husband and the subsequent consequences that she had faced. She expressed the belief that her husband was aware of her affair with Jason and that he had deliberately set her up. She demonstrated an acceptance of her fate and the consequences of her actions. The loss of her husband and daughter was as much her fault as it was yours. On the day she left town, she only had $200 in her pocket. She wanted to move as far away as possible because of what she had done and also because of the videotapes of her sexual antics. She took the first bus that left and made it to Texas, where she got a job as a waitress in a dingy second-rate restaurant. She was situated at a rest area on Interstate 20, which was frequented predominantly by truck drivers. The proprietor leased her a room on the ground floor for a nominal fee. However, in Changi, he engaged in sexual intercourse with her at his own discretion. A year later, she became pregnant. Lacking health insurance, she sought the services of an unlicensed medical practitioner for an abortion. The individual performed an unsuccessful procedure on her, resulting in damage to her reproductive organs. 1 year later, the proprietor initiated sexual relations with her and other truckers. Some utilized contraceptives, while others did not. Upon hospitalization, she exhibited symptoms of acute vaginal inflammatory disease and was diagnosed with AIDS. She has lost a significant amount of weight and is aware of her terminal condition. Her final request is to see you before she dies. Doctor, I am truly sorry to hear this. The daughter is getting married today. I will contact you next week. Do not spend an excessive amount of time on the phone, Mr. Thompson. I will provide you with my direct line number. Honey, do not consume too much alcohol. You will be responsible for transporting us later. Linda embraced her husband and kissed him affectionately. You are the most valuable person in my life, Bill. I will never. Our son is in danger. Let us dance a couple of days later. Bill contacted Dr. Daa from his office to inform him that due to his heavy workload, he would be unable to make the trip south. The doctor advised Bill to at least speak with Nancy on the telephone. He requested that the call be transmitted to the ward where she was located. He possessed a cordless telephone that the nurse would deliver to NY's. From his bedside, Bill heard a weak voice from the past. It was Nancy. It's me, oh Bill, she said. Nancy began to cry. I'm sorry, Bill. I really am sorry for what I did to you and our family. Now I'm paying for it. I forgive you, Nancy, Bill replied. I continue to live my life, and I'm happy. Bill took a deep breath. I have to thank you. After my divorce, I married the most wonderful woman in the world. And we had a son. Lisa adores her new mother, and they are on excellent terms. She married last Saturday, and the wedding was splendid. Undoubtedly, her children will call her grandmother. We are both awaiting this moment. Bill heard Nancy begin to sob, then he heard a continuous high-pitched sound. The sound of medical equipment and noise in NY's room indicated that the call was being transferred. After a period of waiting, a frightened voice was finally heard. Mr. Thompson, this is Nurse Angela Smith. I'm sorry, but I'll have to hang up. The phone went off. Bill looked at the family photo on his desk and smiled. He who laughs last laughs best. If you wish to receive further updates, you are encouraged to subscribe to our channel. The following story is of a more salacious nature than the previous one, therefore, it is recommended that those under the age of 18 refrain from listening to it.